Welcome to Gunfire ZA. To those of you who are new, I am your host, and today I'm going to be talking about these two scopes in front of me. Now, I've done a few videos regarding these scopes, and I'm trying to cover a few different topics when it comes to basically choosing a scope and the practical implications of choosing the wrong scope. And today's video is basically in support of the Delta Stryker HD scope. As you know, the Nightforce was my go-to scope for a while, but it left for certain things to still be desired, and that is why I moved over to the Delta Stryker. And while moving over to the scope, I made the announcement on my Instagram account and my Facebook page, and I really didn't get any good feedback from moving over from the Nightforce to the Delta. Now, I obviously still have the Nightforce, and I'm probably going to keep it because it's such a good scope. But there are a few key things that I just want to highlight why I think personally the Delta Stryker HD is a better scope than the Nightforce NXS. To give you a bit of background information, the Nightforce scopes are very popular in South Africa, and especially the NXS line from Nightforce. And I can tell you personally, when you go to a shooting match or a shooting competition or any shooting event that involves long range shooting, 60 to 70% of the scopes there are easily Nightforce scopes. So saying that, the Nightforce brand has a great following in South Africa. Now, it appears as if the majority of the people have sort of learned to think, or have been brainwashed to think, that there isn't a better scope than a Nightforce available for the specific shooting discipline, such as long range shooting. And the fact of the matter is, and sorry to disappoint them, but there is, and it's sitting right over here. Now, as I have mentioned, I did make an announcement to say that I'm going to buy the scope, and I really didn't get the feedback that I wanted to, because the people kept on commenting to me that the Nightforce is a better scope. And I can tell you now from a personal experience that that simply just is not the case, and I'm going to tell you why. To start off from the back, the Delta has a fast focus style eyepiece or diopter, which I really like and sort of favor over the Nightforce scope. The Nightforce scope sort of features a ocular housing where the diopter and the magnification throw lever are combined into one. So when you want to physically set the diopter, there's a lock ring that you have to loosen, and then you have to play with the diopter, and then you have to lock it again. On the Delta, the magnification ring and the diopter are two separate entities. And the one time that I actually decided to play around with the diopter on the Nightforce, it actually came loose on me when I shot a match, because I was changing between the magnifications, and obviously I didn't tighten the lock ring enough, and the whole thing came loose, which isn't a train smash, but it is, let me say, sort of upsetting or frustrating when you're in a match. This diopter on the Delta is sort of almost a set and forget, and if you want to change it, it's quick. There's no lock ring to loosen or anything else like that. The differences between the magnification throw levers or the magnification ring on these two scopes has been mentioned somewhat in my previous discussion. The Nightforce has a magnification ring where the whole ocular housing rotates in order to increase the magnification, whereas the Delta has a single magnification ring that has a nice throw lever attached to it, which comes standard on the scope, which I like very much, and it is independent of your ocular housing or the fast focus diopter. Now, that really doesn't faze me too much because I'm happy to live with either one of those. But moving on towards the turrets. Now, these diehard Nightforce fans have told me that the turrets on the Delta are not as positive and clicky as on the Nightforce. Well, this is incorrect. I've got both scopes in front of me, and you can physically see that the Delta has positive turrets very similar to the Nightforce, and in some cases I must actually say that I think the Delta has more clicky and audible tactile turrets. Having said that, the turrets between the Delta and the Nightforce are actually very comparable or comparable. The thing is where the Delta to me is better than the Nightforce is when it comes to the illumination. As the Delta has got 11 illumination settings with a off position in between each illumination number. The Nightforce is preset from the factory. It has a little pull out button on the Parallax Adjustment knob, and it is at a fixed brightness, so it is apparently calibrated that you can put it on and shoot with it comfortably at night, and I can confirm to you that that is the case because I had this scope on my 223 training rifle and we actually went out shooting jackals, and if you're in America it is actually similar to a coyote. So it does indeed work well at night even though you have one setting. You can adjust it, but that means you have to go into the scope, you have to undo a cap, and there is a variable resistor that you can turn with a flat tip screwdriver in order to adjust the brightness. But I haven't really heard of anyone that's gone through the effort to do that. The illumination on the Delta, like I said, 11 illumination settings with a off in between each number. And it's bright. You can turn it up to where you don't really want to shoot with a bright illuminated reticle in the dark because it's going to blind you. And you can turn it down to really dim to the point where you can't actually see it. There might be a little bit of light bleeding from the illuminated part into the rest of the reticle, but that only occurs when you look into pitch black darkness and you put it on its higher setting, and in that case you aren't anyways going to shoot on the maximum magnification in pitch black darkness because you won't see anything. If you adjust it to the point where you can still see comfortably to where you are shooting and you are happy with the brightness, there is absolutely no bleeding of light in the reticle, and I am very pleased with that. Now, moving on to the tube diameters, and a tube diameter plays a few roles. The Delta has a 34mm diameter tube and the Nightforce has a 30mm diameter tube. And right off the bat I can tell you that the Delta wins in terms of light transmission and field of view. The Nightforce actually doesn't have a great field of view, and that is something that bothered me greatly because when you have to transition from one target to the other, it sort of becomes difficult to find targets most of the time. Having a greater field of view means that you can shoot at a higher power and you can still transition between targets with relative ease without losing track of where you are. Another claim that these die-hard Nightforce fans tend to make, which I don't agree with, is the fact that they say a Nightforce is the brightest scope they have looked through. Now, this has some merit to it, but I have found that the Nightforce starts to struggle actually when the light conditions start to fade. So it is very bright and clear and crisp image during the middle of the day, for example. But as soon as the light starts to fade on you, the Delta easily comes through and trumps the Nightforce. It is very acceptable to say that a scope has a very bright sight picture, but the question needs to be asked if the person making the statement has considered other optical factors that might make one scope favorable over another. And those properties are things such as the management of chromatic aberration, the contrast of the picture. For example, if you look into a tree or if you're looking at a tree where the sun is shining on the one side but the other half of the tree is in the shade, how well can you distinguish shapes in the shade or in the sun while having both in the same picture? And that is where the delta really does shine. Both scopes tend to have a warmish sight picture, which means it's got a hint more of orangey and bright colors than your colder colors than blue colors. The resolution on the Delta to me is also greater than the Nightforce, although they are very similar. Moving on from the light management differences between the two scopes, we can talk about something like the parallax adjustments on these two scopes. Now, this is where they are also very different, because the Nightforce doesn't have numbered indications in yards or meters. It simply has lines that increase up to infinity, where the Delta has distance markings in meters and also goes up all the way to infinity. However, where the Delta might be a bit better than the Nightforce is the fact that this parallax adjustment goes down to 23 meters, which is very close to 25 yards, whereas the Nightforce NXS has a parallax adjustment that only goes down to 50 yards. That means this scope will even be at home on something like a 22, where you have 22 matches. I know they are even competing in 22 precision rifle series type competitions. So this scope will be very at home on a 22 also. If we consider the internal adjustment range of the Delta versus the Nightforce, you would actually think that the Delta with its wider diameter tube should have more internal adjustment. However, this is not the case, and this is where these two scopes sort of tie, because both scopes have roughly 100 minutes of elevation, and I can't really tell you what the difference in windage is, but I suspect the Nightforce might have a little bit more windage adjustment. But there is a very easy rule of thumb that says the higher the magnification range of your scope, or the higher the magnification it is capable of, generally you have less space for internal adjustment. So the 5.5 to 22, for example, has more elevation than a 8 to 32, simply due to the fact that the 8 to 32 can go to a higher magnification. That is just some food for thought if you weren't aware of that. That pretty much sums up the comparison between the two scopes. So let's address a few other things now. So you might say, or the Nightforce fans might say, but the Nightforce is a American-made scope. And what about the Delta? The Delta is quite questionable. But in actual fact, both scopes, even though Nightforce is an American brand, both scopes come from Japan and they are manufactured in Japan. In terms of warranty, the Nightforce has a lifetime warranty as compared to a 10-year warranty for the Delta. And that might concern you, but some top tier scopes like the Carlas or the Carls, the K624 series and the other scopes also only have a 10-year warranty. And in this day and age, will you actually keep a scope for 10 years? Because I don't think I will, because there's always something bigger and better to try and buy or look at or test. Let's talk about durability. How durable is the Delta compared to the Nightforce? And I must say, Nightforce has quite a clever marketing strategy, because they use this very scope, not this one but similar models, in the NXS line of scopes to demonstrate how rugged the scopes are. Now this includes freezing the scope in water and then shooting the block of ice with a scope inside with a shotgun. Then they use the objective and the bell housing as a hammer, and they actually drive a spike into a piece of wood. They take it off, they throw it, they put it back on the gun, and the point of impact from the rifle has not physically changed. And there are few rifle scope manufacturers that actually do this type of marketing. From Delta, I have not seen much marketing, but I can tell you that Delta isn't afraid to share more technical specifications. The Delta is rated up to 1250 Gs, so this means that it is as equally comfortable on something like a relatively hard-hitting caliber like a 338 Lapua as it is on something as small as a 223 or a 22. Also, the aim of this video is not to offend anyone or to single out any person that has given me comments regarding these two scopes. I just feel that it is unfair towards other scope manufacturers to say that the one and only scope that you are allowed to shoot with is a Nightforce, because that's not the case. The Delta is excellent, and in practice and theory the Delta is better on paper in almost every single category than the Nightforce, and that is why I really think you should invest in something like this, because on even a bad day the Delta is at least 6,000 to 8,000 Rand cheaper than the Nightforce, yet it offers so much more. In terms of durability, like I said, I can't really tell you how the Delta is gonna keep up in compared to the Nightforce, but both scopes track very well. I mean, I'm not gonna really go much more into this because there's a whole video where Richard Utting speaks about the Delta, and it is really a bargain for the price that you can buy it, and for the features which it has. It really competes with the top-end Nightforce, Carlers, Vortex, Razor line of scopes. And in actual fact, the only area where this doesn't beat the Vortex Razor Gen 2 is in field of view, but according to Richard Utting, it trumps the Vortex in almost any other category. If you want any more information regarding the Delta, feel free to contact me or CMH Precision if you are in South Africa, because they have supplied this wonderful scope to me and they really provide great service. I hope you enjoyed this video, and then I will see you next time.